The restaurant was one of those places with soft lighting and prices that made you check your bank account before ordering appetizers. I'd made the reservation 3 weeks ago for our 2-year anniversary, reminding Jake multiple times because he tended to forget important dates. I checked my phone again, 30 minutes late. Not unusual for Jake, his job in financial consulting kept him busy with last-minute client emergencies. I'd ordered wine and was halfway through my first glass when I heard the hostess call out, "Reservation for Jake Lawson." I stood up, smoothing my dress, ready to wave him over, but the woman who approached the hostess was Jake. She was tall, brunette, wearing a navy dress that looked expensive. "That's me," she said. "Well, I'm meeting Jake Lawson. Has he arrived yet?" My stomach dropped. The hostess looked confused, glancing between her tablet and the woman. "We have a reservation under Jake Lawson, but this other guest," she gestured toward me. The brunette turned, and our eyes met across the restaurant. Something in her expression mirrored what I felt, confusion turning rapidly into horrified understanding. "I'm Jake's girlfriend," I said, my voice sounding far away. "We've been together for 2 years." The woman's face went pale. "I'm Elise. I've been dating Jake for 18 months. The restaurant seemed to tilt. We stood there, 2 women staring at each other, understanding simultaneously that we'd both been dating the same man. Jake arrived 10 minutes later, all easy smiles and apologies about traffic. He was halfway through explaining when he saw us both standing there together at the hostess stand. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, calculation, then smooth confidence. That confidence was what scared me most. "Samantha, what's going on?" He ignored Elise completely, focusing entirely on me. "Who is this woman?" "I'm your girlfriend," Elise said, her voice shaking. "We've been together for over a year." Jake laughed, actually laughed. "Babe, this is insane. This woman's been stalking me for months, my ex who can't accept we're done." He turned to Elise, his expression hardening. "I told you to leave me alone. This is harassment." But Elise pulled out her phone, scrolling frantically. "These are from last week, dinner at your place, the weekend trip to the coast, all recent, all real." I looked at the photos she showed me. Jake in casual clothes I'd never seen, Jake at restaurants I'd never been to, Jake looking relaxed and happy in a life I knew nothing about. "They're photoshopped," Jake said smoothly. "Samantha, come on, let's go. This woman needs help, not an audience." He reached for my hand and for a moment, God help me, I almost took it. His confidence was so complete, so convincing. Maybe Elise was unstable. Maybe this was all some bizarre misunderstanding. Then I saw the date stamp on one of her photos. Last Tuesday, the night Jake told me he was in meetings until midnight. I didn't confront him that night. I let Jake drive me home, listened to him talk about crazy exes and stalker behavior, nodded in all the right places. But my mind was racing, replaying every inconsistency I'd ignored over 2 years. The business trips that seemed to have no paper trail, the way he'd smell different sometimes, cologne I'd never bought him, laundry detergent that wasn't what I used, messages he'd delete the instant they appeared on his phone. The separate bedrooms at his apartment that he claimed was temporary while renovating. How I'd never met his family, never been invited to work events, never really integrated into his life beyond our bubble. Back at my place, I tried to log into our shared streaming account, something we'd set up 6 months ago. My profile was there, Sam, but there was another one I'd never noticed before, E. Elise. He had a profile for her on our supposedly shared account. I scrolled through the viewing history under E, shows I'd never heard of, movies watched at times when Jake had supposedly been with me. An entire parallel life playing out in the same subscription I was paying for. My hands shook as I set the phone down. How much of the past 2 years had been real? How much had I been sharing him without even knowing? The second phone appeared 3 days later. Jake had stayed over, something that happened maybe once a week. Now I understood why. While he showered, a phone I'd never seen before buzzed on my nightstand. I grabbed it without thinking. The wallpaper wasn't a photo of us, it was Elise, smiling, happy, clearly in love. Messages flashed across the lock screen, but they weren't sweet. They were angry. "You lied to me about everything. I can't believe I trusted you. Don't contact me again." So Jake was losing Elise too. But instead of coming clean with me, he was hiding that phone, pretending everything was fine on both fronts. I scrolled up carefully, finding older messages from before the restaurant, sweet ones. Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Love you. Messages identical in tone to the ones he sent me. I took photos of everything, the phone itself, the messages, the wallpaper, the contact name he'd saved her under, downloaded them to a secret folder on my phone, and deleted any trace that I'd been looking. When Jake emerged from the shower, I was calm, smiling even. I need to run some errands today, want to grab dinner tonight. Can't, babe, client emergency in Portland, leaving in an hour. He kissed my forehead, grabbed the second phone without even trying to hide it, and left. But I noticed how he checked it immediately, his face tightening as he read what I assumed were more angry messages from Elise. He was trying to manage both of us, keep both relationships alive even as one was crumbling. I tracked his location on the app we'd installed for safety. He wasn't heading to the airport, he was driving to an address on the other side of town. The address where Elise lived, probably trying to smooth things over with her, just like he'd smoothed things over with me. I contacted Elise through Instagram. Her profile was public, filled with photos of a life that looked happy and normal, except for the ones with Jake that I now recognized. We met at a coffee shop, both of us nervous and defensive, but as we compared notes, defensive turned to horrified. He told me he works in tech consulting, Elise said, travels to San Francisco twice a month. He told me financial consulting, business trips to Portland. Neither of us had ever seen pay stubs, neither had been to his actual workplace, neither had a home address beyond the apartment he claimed was temporary. We compared gifts. I showed her the necklace he'd given me for Christmas, one of a kind, he'd said. Elise pulled out an identical one. His birthday, I said, July 15th. He told me March 3rd. We laid out everything, dates he'd been with each of us, places he'd claimed to be, stories he'd told. The overlaps were impossible. He'd been living two completely separate lives, somehow managing to keep us from ever crossing paths. Until the restaurant. Where does he actually live? I asked. Elise shook her head. I don't know. He said his lease was up and he was staying with a friend while looking for a new place. That was 4 months ago. We both fell silent, the weight of it settling in. We'd been dating a ghost. I followed Jake one morning when he left my apartment for work, watched him drive to a building downtown that he'd mentioned as his office. I waited 30 minutes, then walked in. I'm here to see Jake Lawson, I told the receptionist. She checked her computer, frowning. We don't have anyone by that name working here. He's in consulting, maybe he's a contractor. Ma'am, I've been here 5 years. We've never had a Jake Lawson in this building. I thanked her and left, my legs unsteady. The address on his business card, which I'd kept in my wallet for 2 years, was fake. That evening, I drove to the apartment he'd shown me once as his temporary place. The building manager confirmed it was an Airbnb property, frequently booked under different names. Jake Lawson, I asked. Not in our system, but we get a lot of short-term renters who use aliases for privacy. I sat in my car outside the building, trying to reconcile everything. The man I'd been with for 2 years didn't have a real job, a real home, or apparently even a real name. Every solid fact about him was dissolving, and I was left holding nothing but lies. When I finally confronted him, Jake's performance was masterful. He didn't deny anything, instead he broke down. You're right, everything you're saying is right. He sat on my couch, head in his hands, the picture of devastation. I've been lying because I'm ashamed. My real job, I lost it 2 years ago. The consulting work is freelance, unstable. I didn't want you to see me as a failure. And Elise. A mistake, a huge mistake when we were going through that rough patch last spring. I ended it, but she wouldn't let go. I should have told you, but I was terrified of losing you. His voice cracked convincingly. I'm not proud of who I've become. The lies spiraled out of control. I kept thinking I'd fix everything, get back on my feet, then come clean, but it just got worse. He looked up at me with wounded eyes. I know I don't deserve it, but please, let me make this right. Let me prove I can be the man you fell in love with. And God help me, I found myself apologizing, for not being understanding, for not seeing how much pressure he was under, for being too harsh. Elise had warned me. He's dangerous, not physically but psychologically. He'll make you doubt reality itself. I'd brushed it off, now I was living it. The message came from an unknown number. Jake proposed to Elise last week, thought you should know. I laughed it off. Another lie from whatever friend of Elise's was trying to stir up drama. Jake had been with me all last week. We'd had dinner together 4 times. Then they sent me the video. It was shot at a rooftop restaurant I recognized. Upscale, romantic, the kind of place Jake said was too expensive for a casual Tuesday. He was on one knee, ring box open, Elise crying happy tears. The date stamp showed last Tuesday, the night he'd told me he had a late client call and couldn't come over. I called my coworker who'd gotten married there last year. That restaurant, how much advance notice do you need for a reservation? Months usually, it's super exclusive, why? My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. Jake had planned an engagement to another woman months in advance, managing schedules and lies with surgical precision. I was supposed to be his girlfriend, she was supposed to be his fiancée, and neither of us had been told about the other's existence. The party was supposed to be celebrating my friend's promotion. I'd almost cancelled, too exhausted from the emotional chaos of the past 2 weeks, but friends insisted, and I needed to feel normal for a few hours. I walked in to find Jake already there. With Elise. My brain couldn't process it. This was my social circle, my friends. What was she doing here? Then someone called out, "Congratulations, Sam, I heard about the engagement." The room went silent. People looked between me, Jake, and Elise, clearly confused about which woman was actually engaged to him. Elise's face had gone white. What? Another friend, oblivious to the tension, pulled out her phone. I saw it on Instagram. The ring looked amazing. But the photos she showed weren't on Jake's account. They were on a profile I'd never seen before. Justin Marks. Different name, different profile picture, but the same face, Jake's face, with Elise, posting about their engagement, their relationship, their life together. My friends were scrolling now, finding the profile, seeing the posts, understanding dawning on their faces. "Is this real?" someone whispered. "He's been using a different name," another said. I watched their expressions change from confusion to pity. They'd known I was dating Jake. Now they were seeing proof he'd been living an entirely different life under a different identity. The humiliation was complete. I drove to the address Jake had once mentioned as his family home, somewhere he claimed to visit occasionally, but that I'd never been invited to. It was time to meet his family, whether he wanted me to or not. The house was modest but well maintained. I knocked, rehearsing what I'd say to his parents about their son's double life. A middle-aged couple answered. They smiled politely, expectantly. "Hi, I'm looking for Jake Lawson, or his family." Their smiles faded to confusion. "I'm sorry, we don't know anyone by that name." He said this was his family home, that he grew up here. The man shook his head. "We've owned this house for 15 years. Before that it belonged to the Hendersons. Never heard of any Lawsons." "Maybe he rents from you, stays here sometimes." "We don't rent, this is just our home." The woman was looking concerned now. "Are you okay? Do you need us to call someone?" I apologized, stumbled back to my car and sat there shaking. The house he'd pointed out on drives through this neighborhood, the place he'd woven into stories about his childhood, it had nothing to do with him. I drove home in tears, finally understanding completely. I hadn't been dating someone who was lying. I'd been dating someone who didn't exist. Jake Lawson was a character, a role, a complete fabrication. And I'd spent 2 years in love with a ghost. I became obsessed with finding the truth, spent hours digging through public records, searching databases, following digital trails that led nowhere. I discovered Justin Marks, the name from the Instagram profile. Different job, different city, different backstory, but the same face in photos. Then I found Marcus Bennett. Another profile, another identity, another woman in photos that looked recent. 3 separate identities, 3 different social media presences, 3 complete lives with different jobs, addresses, and apparently different girlfriends. His LinkedIn profiles were all fake, companies that didn't exist, positions at corporations that had no record of him, recommendations from people whose profiles were equally fabricated. I made spreadsheets, timelines, maps of where each identity supposedly lived, none of it connected to a real person I could verify existed. Elise and I compared notes obsessively. Between us, we'd compiled a portrait of a man who was simultaneously a financial consultant in Seattle, a tech entrepreneur in Portland, and a marketing director in San Francisco. Except he wasn't any of those things. He was whoever he needed to be in any given moment. Who is he really? Elise asked during one of our late-night calls. I don't think there is a really, I said. I think he's just whoever works. The credit card statement arrived with charges I didn't recognize, expensive restaurants, hotels, purchases from stores I'd never been to. I called the bank. These aren't my charges. They're from the secondary card holder. The name on file is Jake Lawson. My blood ran cold. I never authorized a secondary card. The banker was quiet for a moment. According to our records, you signed the authorization 4 months ago. We have your signature on file. That's impossible, but then I remembered. 4 months ago, Jake had asked me to sign some boring paperwork for an investment opportunity he was helping me with. I'd signed without really reading it, trusting him completely. He'd forged access to my credit, been using it for months. Elise discovered something similar. He convinced me to take out a loan, said it was for a business investment we'd share, that he'd pay me back within 3 months. She laughed bitterly. The loan was for $20,000. I haven't seen a cent and now I'm stuck with the payments. We reported it to fraud departments, started filing complaints. But the trail was so complicated, the documentation so carefully constructed, that investigators said it might take months to untangle. Jake had systematically stolen from both of us, while making us believe we were partners in building a future. Jake found out I'd been digging. Don't know how, maybe he was monitoring my online activity somehow, but he showed up at my apartment furious. What the hell are you doing? He grabbed my laptop, seeing the spreadsheets, the research. This is insane, Samantha. You're becoming obsessed, paranoid. You've been using at least 3 different names. For privacy, for work, you're twisting everything to fit this crazy narrative. His voice was rising. Do you know how insane you sound? I've tried to be patient with your trust issues, but this is too much. My trust issues? You stole from me. I borrowed from a shared account, that's what couples do. He was backing me into a corner now, not physically threatening but overwhelming. You're making me the villain because you can't handle a normal relationship. Everyone been worried about you. Your friends, your co-workers, they all see you falling apart. He pulled out his phone, showing me messages. Friends expressing concern about my paranoid behavior. Co-workers suggesting I might need a break from work. All carefully collected screenshots painting me as unstable. You did this, I whispered. I'm trying to help you, but if you keep spreading these insane lies about me, I'll have to protect myself. Do you understand? Defamation is a serious crime. He left me shaking, doubting everything I knew. Was I losing my mind? Were the lies so complete that truth had become impossible to recognize? My friends started distancing themselves. Invitations stopped coming. Messages went unanswered. When I did see people, they treated me carefully, like I might break or explode. Just take care of yourself, they'd say. Focus on your health. Work became impossible. My performance suffered. I made mistakes I'd never made before, forgot meetings, couldn't concentrate. My boss suggested a mental health leave. You've been through a lot. Maybe some time away would help. I started keeping a detailed journal, documenting everything, trying to hold on to what was real versus what Jake had made me believe. Dates, times, conversations, evidence. Something concrete when everything else felt like it was dissolving. I tried to contact Elise, needing to confirm I wasn't alone in this. Her phone was disconnected. Her social media had been deleted. Her apartment, when I drove by, had different people living in it. She was gone. She moved abroad, Jake told me casually when I mentioned it. Couldn't handle the drama, probably best for everyone. But I didn't believe him. Elise had been as determined as I was to expose him. She wouldn't just disappear. Unless she hadn't had a choice. The private investigator cost more than I could afford, but I was desperate. I gave her everything, all 3 names, all the information Elise and I had compiled, every detail I could remember. 2 weeks later, she called me into her office with a file that made my hands shake. His real name is Daniel Carter. He's wanted in connection with fraud cases in 4 states. Multiple women have filed reports: identity theft, financial fraud, coercion. Some of the cases are still open. She showed me photos of other women, at least 8 that she'd found. Different cities, different timelines, but the same pattern. He'd enter their lives, establish a relationship, steal what he could, then disappear. "And Elise?" I asked. The investigator's expression was grim. "There's a missing persons report filed by her sister 3 weeks ago. Police are investigating. Your name came up in connection to her. They'll probably want to talk to you." My stomach dropped. "You think he hurt her?" "I think she started asking too many questions like you did, and then she vanished." She slid another document across the desk. "There are 2 other women in his orbit who have filed similar reports. One claimed he threatened her when she tried to leave. Another said he became violent when confronted." I'd been sleeping next to a predator, trusting someone who'd systematically destroyed multiple women's lives. And I might be next. The storage unit was registered under one of his fake names. The investigator had tracked it down through financial records, a pattern of monthly payments from one of the accounts he'd opened using stolen identities. I shouldn't have gone alone. I should have called police. But I needed to see for myself. The unit was full of boxes. Inside, dozens of fake IDs with his face and different names. Passports, credit cards, SIM cards, hundreds of them probably used once and discarded. Legal documents with forged signatures. And photos, so many photos. Different women in each one, smiling and happy, unaware they were being catalogued. I found Elise's necklace, the one I'd seen her wearing in every photo, the one she never took off. It sat in a small jewelry box alongside other pieces that probably belonged to other victims. Trophies, he'd been keeping trophies. I took photos of everything with shaking hands, then called the police. While I waited for them to arrive, I sat in my car staring at the evidence of systematic predation. Daniel Carter wasn't just a con artist, he was a collector, and we'd all been his prizes. The police took my statement, examined the storage unit, confirmed the missing persons case on Elise, but they needed more evidence to make an arrest that would stick. Daniel was good at creating reasonable doubt, at having explanations ready. "Help us build a case," the detective said. "If you're willing to cooperate, we might be able to stop him before someone else gets hurt." So I agreed to something terrifying: continue the relationship, pretend I believed his lies, gather evidence while acting like nothing had changed. Daniel seemed pleased that I'd come to my senses. He was attentive again, charming, the perfect boyfriend. But I saw everything differently now: the manipulation tactics, the careful word choices, the way he managed my emotions like a conductor leading an orchestra. I wore a wire to some of our meetings, recorded phone calls, documented every lie, every inconsistency, built a timeline that showed his pattern of behavior. The tension was unbearable. Every time I smiled at him, I wanted to scream. Every kiss felt like betrayal of every woman he'd hurt. But I kept going, knowing this might be the only way to stop him. I got careless. During one of Daniel's phone calls, I was trying to position my phone to record better. He caught me. "What are you doing?" "Nothing, just checking messages." He grabbed my phone before I could stop him, saw the recording app open. His expression changed instantly, the mask dropping, something cold and furious underneath. He smashed my phone against the wall. It shattered, pieces scattering across my floor. "How could you?" he was screaming now, all pretense gone. "After everything I've done for you, you're spying on me." I backed away, genuinely frightened for the first time. This was the real Daniel, not any of his personas. Then he stopped, took a breath. When he looked at me again, the mask was back in place. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. The stress of everything, the accusations, the paranoia, it's making me crazy." He sat down, head in his hands. "This is why I need help, why we need help, couples therapy, please." He left an hour later, after making me promise I wouldn't do anything rash, after convincing me his explosion was understandable given the circumstances. But I'd seen the truth, the violence simmering underneath, the danger I'd been living next to. I called the detective the moment he was gone. I couldn't gather more evidence directly, but I could do something else. I started leaking information anonymously online, posting in forums about scams, sharing photos of Daniel's fake profiles, warning other women about the tactics he used. The responses came flooding in. Women reached out with their own stories, their own versions of Jake or Justin or Marcus. Each one added another piece to the puzzle. He told me his name was Tyler, one woman wrote. We dated for 8 months. He convinced me to co-sign a lease, then disappeared with the security deposit. I knew him as Brandon. He said he was a pilot, borrowed money for flight school, and I never saw him or the money again. Christopher, he lived with me for 6 months, stole my identity and opened credit cards in my name, destroyed my credit score. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Different details, same pattern. Daniel had been doing this for years, possibly decades, moving from city to city and woman to woman. I compiled everything into a document, screenshots, testimonies, timelines, photos, sent it anonymously to journalists who covered fraud cases. If the legal system couldn't stop him yet, maybe public exposure could. The journalist who contacted me specialized in long-form investigative pieces. She'd been following fraud cases for years and was shocked by the scope of Daniel's operation. This isn't just relationship fraud. This is systematic identity theft, financial fraud, possibly kidnapping if your friend Elise is truly missing. This could be a major story. We worked together carefully, verifying every detail, protecting victims' identities when requested, building a comprehensive timeline of his crimes. The dossier grew massive, every lie, every alias, every stolen dollar, every victim we could find. Photos showing him with different women in different cities, using different names. Financial records proving systematic theft. Testimony from 8 women willing to go on record. "We're ready to publish," the journalist said after 3 months of work. "But I need you to be prepared. This will go public. He'll know you were involved. Are you ready for that?" I thought about Elise, missing for months now. About the other women who'd been too afraid or ashamed to come forward. About whoever might be next if Daniel wasn't stopped. "Publish it," I said. The article went viral within hours. The Chameleon, how one man lived dozens of lives and destroyed them all. The police moved fast once the story broke. They'd been building their case, and the public exposure gave them the push they needed. They set up a sting operation. I was the bait. I texted Daniel, "We need to talk. Meet me at the Riverside Hotel. I have information about a business opportunity you might be interested in." The hotel, the place where he'd proposed to Elise, seemed fitting. I sat in the lobby, wired, surrounded by plainclothes officers, watching the entrance. When Daniel walked in, he looked confident, probably thinking he could manipulate me one more time. He sat down across from me, smiling. "Samantha, I'm glad you reached out. I've missed you. I know what you've been doing, all of it. Every woman, every lie, every stolen dollar." His smile didn't falter. "You've been listening to too many conspiracy theories. I think we should." "Police, don't move." Officers appeared from every direction. Daniel's expression cycled through surprise, calculation, then something like resignation. He'd finally run out of personas to hide behind. They read him his rights while I watched, trembling but relieved. It was over, finally over. The arrest was televised. Someone had tipped off local news, and the footage went viral within hours, Daniel being led out in handcuffs, trying to maintain dignity, failing completely. Comments flooded social media, women sharing their own stories of being fooled by charming men, outrage at how long he'd gotten away with it, praise for the victims who'd come forward. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Media requests, calls from lawyers, messages from women I'd never met thanking me for speaking up. The biggest call came 3 days after the arrest, a police officer in Nevada. "We found Elise Morrison, she's alive." I broke down sobbing. "Is she okay?" Physically, yes. Emotionally, she's been through a lot. Daniel had convinced her to move with him, then trapped her in a situation where she felt she couldn't leave or contact anyone. She's safe now. Elise called me that evening. Her voice was different, harder, more fragile. "You saved my life. If you hadn't kept digging, if you hadn't exposed him, I don't know what would have happened. I'm just glad you're okay. We should get coffee when I'm ready. When we're both ready, compare notes about dating the same ghost." We laughed, but it was the kind of laughter that came from surviving something terrible together. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified, reading from the journal I'd kept, dates, times, lies, manipulations, every detail documented. He made me doubt my own sanity, I told the court. Made me question everything I knew to be true. That's not just fraud, it's psychological torture. 8 other women testified, each one telling their version of the same story: charmed, manipulated, robbed, discarded. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, coercion, theft. The prosecutor was pushing for 20 years. Daniel's lawyer tried to paint him as someone struggling with mental health issues, someone who'd made mistakes but wasn't a predator. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all major counts, sentencing was set for 2 months later. The judge looked at Daniel before ending the session. You systematically destroyed multiple lives for your own gain. You showed no remorse, no recognition of the harm you caused. Society needs protection from people like you. I left the courthouse feeling lighter than I had in months. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was something. Sentencing day came with media attention and victim statements. The judge allowed all of us to speak if we wanted to. I read my statement carefully, looking directly at Daniel. You stole 2 years of my life, but more than that, you stole my ability to trust, to feel safe, to believe in my own judgment. You made me doubt reality itself. That's the real crime, not the money, not the lies about your name or job. It's the way you made me question my own sanity. But here's what you didn't count on: I'm still standing. We're all still standing. Every woman you tried to destroy, we survived. We rebuilt. We found each other and became stronger because of it. So thank you in a twisted way. You taught me what real strength looks like, and it's not you. The judge sentenced him to multiple consecutive sentences, totaling 38 years. I hope you use that time to reflect on the destruction you've caused, she said. Daniel showed no emotion, just stared straight ahead as they led him away. Elise and I left together, along with 3 other women who'd testified. We went to dinner, not to celebrate exactly, but to acknowledge that we'd survived, that we'd helped stop him. To finding ourselves again, Elise toasted. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in months I felt genuinely hopeful. 6 months after the trial, I sat in a podcast studio. The show I'd started, Behind the Mask, Stories of Emotional Manipulation, had gained a surprising following. Women reaching out with their own stories, finding community, learning to recognize red flags. Today's episode was about my experience with Daniel. I'd told parts of it before, but this was the complete story, from the restaurant confrontation to the trial. How do you trust again after something like that? The co-host asked. Slowly, very slowly, and differently, I pay attention to actions now, not just words. I trust my instincts instead of dismissing them. I don't apologize for having boundaries. I paused. And I forgive myself for being fooled. That's the hardest part, accepting that being trusting isn't a weakness. He was the problem, not me. After the recording, I met friends for coffee. Real friends, ones who'd stood by me through everything. We sat at the same cafe where the nightmare had started, where the hostess had called out Jake's name and 2 women had both answered. But this time was different. This time I was there by choice, meeting people I'd chosen, living a life I was actively building instead of one someone had constructed for me. My phone buzzed with a message from Elise. Podcast was perfect, proud of you, coffee next week. I smiled, texting back a confirmation. We'd both moved to the same city, finding safety and proximity to someone who truly understood. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the cafe. I ordered another coffee, not because I was waiting for anyone, but because I wanted to. Because I could sit alone and feel complete, whole myself. I'd dated a ghost for 2 years, but I'd survived, exposed him, helped stop him from hurting others, and in the process, I'd found something more valuable than any relationship could provide. I'd found myself again, the real, complete, unmanipulated version, not perfect but genuine. And this time nobody could take that away.